We are now going to cover Chapter 4, which is entitled Developing a Measurement and Recording Plan. Again, this is just like Chapter 3, a lot of common sense. It's not a long lecture, which I'm sure you're thankful for. So talking about, we're going to cover the components of a good recording plan, and I've listed them here, and we're going to talk about each one of these. So starting with selecting a measurement method, we'll be covering 4 different measurement methods over the next 2 weeks. Behavioral observation, individualized rating scale, standardized questionnaires, and logs. So over the next 2 weeks, you'll learn about all these different measurement methods. In terms of who should collect the data, there are, I mentioned in the previous lecture that it is most likely that program evaluation is self-report data, where the client reports the data. However, you can also collect it from other people. So we're going to talk about advantages and disadvantages with different sources. And we're going to start out with the client. And usually what I do is just ask, okay, what are the advantages of collecting the data for the client, and have a little class participation here, but modifying this exercise to an online exercise. What I'd like you to do is I'm going to give you some of my ideas, some of the ideas in the book, and hopefully you'll think about those independently and come up with some of your own. So let's start out with the advantages of collecting data from a client. The most obvious one is they're always there when the problem occurs. That might sound obvious, but that's why self-report is so popular. They also may be uniquely motivated to change behavior because it's causing them distress. So since it's causing them distress, they're motivated to record behavior. Also, self-report data is fairly convenient and easy to obtain from clients. You see them, in an inpatient setting daily or multiple times a week, in an outpatient setting usually maybe once a week. So it's fairly easy to obtain from a client. And the last one that I have is that the client defines whether a problem exists. So the client's perspective is especially important. If the client doesn't think a problem exists, then they're probably not going to be motivated to record any data on the problem. So those are the advantages that I have. If you'd like to pause and add some of your own, think about it, you're welcome to do that. Going on to disadvantages of client data, client self-report data. They may not want to provide accurate information. And you might say, well, under what circumstances is this true? This is true mainly in cases where the client is court-ordered, perhaps in a situation where you're working with a mother and you have their child is in state custody, and you ask them about their drug use, you ask them about their deviant behaviors, they're unlikely to give you accurate information if they think that that's going to delay them getting their child. Also, A&D clients are notorious for not giving accurate information, especially while they're in the denial phase of their treatment, where they don't think they have a problem, maybe after a DUI or something like that they don't think they have a problem. So that's one disadvantage. There may be cases where the client is too young to provide information. Also, clients who are disabled or mentally challenged may not be able to provide the information you need. There are special recording tools. You've seen them, the charts that have the smile, the faces that have the mood states, and the pain scales that have the faces. There are some tools that can be adapted for the young and disabled, but the number of tools that you have at your disposal is greatly reduced. Third, the client may not, depending on their diagnosis, may not be aware of their problem, that they have a problem at all. Many borderline clients, depending on what day you talk with them, they don't think they have a problem. They think that everybody else is their problem. Also, many times, clients who are schizophrenic, my brother is schizophrenic, and if I ask him point blank, do you hear voices? What do the voices say? He'll tell me point blank, I don't hear any voices. Yet I'll be in the room when he's talking to the voices. And fourth disadvantage is because of something called reactivity, and we'll talk extensively about reactivity. But what reactivity is that target may change simply due to the process of recording. And sometimes this can be used as an intervention. It can be seen as an advantage. It's used in weight loss, that the process of recording everything you eat actually changes what you eat, because you don't want to write it down. If you don't want to write down deviant behavior, then you may simply not write it down, so it's not accurate. So it can work either way. You can use it as an intervention, as the Weight Watchers do, or reactivity. Just the process of writing it down, the client may change their behavior, but it's not a lasting change. You have to ask yourself, even if it's changing their behavior, what happens after the recording stops? And just a note about clients, sometimes clients are the only sources of information. They don't have anybody else to collect data for them. So I invite you to read on pages 65 and 66 how to motivate the client to provide accurate information. Because, we read in the textbook, yes, we use this, various methods, but if the client is unwilling to or unmotivated to collect the data, then you don't have much to work with in terms of using a single system design and repeated measures. Okay, let's move on. I'm going to skip around here, go to the last one, relevant others. Relevant others can include relatives, obviously, friends, teachers, or people who work in institutions that see people on a daily basis. Let's talk about advantages first. I just alluded to the first advantages. They interact with clients on a daily basis, so they can provide information on clients' real-world functioning. Second, some interventions are interpersonally based, so they have unique information about these interactions from their perspective. The client has a perspective about these interactions, and the relevant others have information about these interactions. Third advantage is that they can observe the target as it naturally occurs without the reactive effect. So since they're around the client daily, they can observe, if you will, the client in its natural habitat, and that's an advantage. Lastly, well, not lastly, the last one I have is that the client may be motivated because the client's behavior negatively affects them, and they're motivated to change that client's behavior because that will make their life better, and they care about the client, so they empathize, sympathize with the client, and want a better life for the client. So if you want, pause, think about some other advantages of relevant others. But now we're going to be talking about disadvantages. As I alluded to earlier, some clients are alone and don't have relevant others. Homeless people may not have any relatives or friends. You might get people that work in homeless shelters, but in general, there may be some clients that aren't willing to collect data for the clients. Second, the clients may not want you to collect data from relevant others. They may not want people in their business, and you need to get permission from people to collect data about them. Thirdly, they may fudge the data depending on how the data will be used. And this can work a couple different ways. They may think that their child, if their child is in state custody, they may, and their child comes home on a trial visit, they may report, hey, my child doesn't have any problems, and in hopes that those reports may speed up family reunification, or they may, in terms of family dynamics, they may see the child. That child may operate as the black sheep in the family and take all the blame, hold all the family's pathology. And so the data is fudged so that the child is taking, the heat for the whole family. Fourth, some relevant others may not know enough about a client's problems. There are some clients, such as alcoholics, that are very good at hiding their behavior or disguising their behavior, hiding their drinking. So if you ask them, how much do they drink, you're not going to get accurate information. Fourth, some relevant others, because of the amount of time that it may take to collect data, may not be willing to participate in the process. And the last one that I have is that you have to be aware that the data that is collected may affect the relationship between the client and the relevant other. If you share this information with the client, that what the relevant other is seeing, it may be too much for the client to handle. It may not be what the client wants to hear, and it may actually affect the relationship between the client and the relevant other. So you may estrange a client from a relative or a friend, and you certainly don't want to do that. Let's talk about practitioners or clinicians. The first obvious advantage is professional training and expertise. What you're obtaining now in all your classes is that you know what to look for in terms of diagnosing and in terms of symptoms and in terms of knowing what to record. Also, you have a familiarity with the client. You have a relationship. Hopefully that's a trusting relationship of unconditional regard, as Roger says, and that is an advantage. And the last one that I have is during sessions, you can record data unobtrusively. For example, if you wanted to note, let's use a strengths perspective, the number of positive statements that a client makes about him or herself during a session, you can record that unobtrusively. All clinicians take notes, and you can record that without causing the client too much stress. Disadvantages. The practitioner is not present during the client's daily life, and they may not be around when problems occur. We're not, in the client's natural habitat, using that phrase again. And so we just see them in a very small slice of their life in a situation in an office where they may act very differently than they normally do. Secondly, the data may be biased because of the desire of the practitioner's desire to succeed. So the practitioner may fudge the data in a positive direction because they want to feel, if my clients succeed, then I'm successful. So practitioners have to be aware of that and try to be as objective as possible. And we can't be totally objective. There's always an element of subjectivity, but we need to be aware of those natural desires that we have to see our clients to succeed, and we have to watch how those desires manifest in our practice. And the last one that I have is that the validity of the data, the accuracy of the data, may depend on how the data will be used. are these records private? Are they used as incentives within the agency? Are they used for, money that you get for grants? We all know that anything that you write down can be subpoenaed by the court, so we're careful about what we record. The validity of the data, again, may depend on how the data will be used and how we perceive it will be used in the future, either negatively or positively against us or our clients. And finally, the last source of collecting data, another professional, an independent advisor, such as a supervisor or a colleague, somebody that may view video tapes of sessions or may independently interview your client. Advantage: they may be more objective because they're less personally invested with the client. They may be able to provide more accurate, less biased assessment of the client. Also, some evaluators have special training in evaluating recording sessions or have special training in interviewing clients and diagnosing clients and observing clients. Disadvantages of having other professionals collect data: they're less involved with the client, they're less familiar with the client. So that can cut both ways. It makes you more objective, but since you're less familiar, you may not pick up on certain behavior patterns that you see through the course of weeks of working with a client. And the last one that I have, in busy agencies, colleagues simply may be too busy to help out. And that certainly, with the budget constraints everywhere with this economy, that certainly may be the case. Okay, that's all I have on advantages and disadvantages with different sources. In terms of when and where to collect data, it's important to record the data concurrently with the outcome. For example, when the problem is happening, you don't want to record it, if it happens early in the day, record it at night. If you're doing, for example, behavior observation or logs, you want to record it as it's happening, because our memory, even though we think that we'll remember something, sort of like, when you get up, you have a vivid dream, you think you're going to remember it, and then it just slips away. So you want to record the data concurrently with the outcome. Representative and relevant samples of times and places. You should know in terms of a behavior that you want to change, when that behavior happens and where that behavior happens, so that you collect the data during those times. And then finally, you want to record at pre-designated times and in pre-designated places. So that's that consistency. That helps with reliability. And we'll talk about this again and again, but you want to be consistent in your data collection. How often to collect data? Well, as a researcher, and I want as much data as I can, but I know that's not often practical. So you have to strike the balance between what is practical and what is not a burden to the client or other people. And however, you need to understand that you need to use repeated measures, sometimes daily measures, that are quick. You'd want to use daily measures that are quick. Standardized scales are typically used weekly, but they are, you don't have a single system design if you just do a pre and post test. So they are extremely important. They're just essential in single system designs. And finally, again, that consistency. Record at pre-designated times in terms of how often. How many targets to record? Well, you can't measure everything. And that's something that as a researcher and a practitioner you have to accept. So you have to set priority. Don't select an overwhelming number. Consider the willingness and availability of the people to record the data, and understand the complexity of the target and the client's situations. You don't want to have two measures of the same target. If you have a complex target, though, you know you're going to have more than one measure. Standardized recording procedures, and this gets back to the reliability, and it talks about it directly. You need to standardize the time, the place, and the method. So if you collect data Monday at 4 p.m. in the office, then you need to do that every week. If you collected it, Monday, 4 o'clock in a loud office, a loud waiting room rather than a quiet office, then you can see that might be a problem because it's not consistent. And the reason we want consistency is changes in time, place, or method make it difficult to determine changes in outcome, because we don't know if we're changing the time, the place, or the method. Then we don't know if the changes that we see are due to real changes in client behavior or due to the changes in time, place, or method. So it's very important to do that. Charting conventions, just want to go, you can see in your book examples of some A-B designs. You'll always see that the outcome is graphed on the vertical axis. This is where I want to draw on the board. The time on the horizontal axis, so if that's daily or weekly, you would indicate that on the horizontal axis. You would separate the phases, and by the phases I mean baseline and any intervention phases that you have and follow-up phases. You want to separate them by a vertical line, and then you don't connect the last point of one phase to the first point of another phase. You use care in plotting missing data. We'll talk about that at length. We'll mention that later. But you don't, if somebody is there for week 6 and week 8, you simply don't connect dots week 6 to 8. Sometimes we put a dotted line to indicate that there's a missing week there. And as I mentioned, I believe in the, chapter 2, the letter A always designates the baseline phase, where letters B through Z designate intervention phases. And then when you have a combination of phases, you'll have BC together. And then phases are always separated by dashes. So you have A dash B to indicate your basic AB design. You have A dash B dash BC to indicate a baseline, the intervention of B, and then the intervention of B and C combined. And then lastly, in terms of charting, sometimes it's helpful to plot 2 or 3 outcomes on the same chart to examine variation. Here's an example of that. We look at this plot. So you can see the problem of marital conflict and depression on the vertical axis, horizontal axis weeks, and then your yellow line represents marital conflict, white line indicates depression, so you can see how those correlate, and you see to more or less they more or less go along the same line. There is some variation, but that's very helpful. But you can only do that when the scale of your the high to low numbers, like a scale ranges from 0 to 100, if that's the same for 2 scales. And that's the advantage of using scales with the same ranges, 0 to 100. For example, the Walmer scales that we'll look at use the same range, 0 to 100. Advantage of systematic recording plan. At this point, again, I would ask for a little class participation, but instead I'm going to invite you to read on page 84 what those are. The measurement resources on the internet, even, I've been teaching this class for about 6-7 years, and they've just really exploded, and those are documented on pages 101 to 102, in addition to the hard copy compendiums of measures. There's also some measurement, and I also gave you some internet sites on your syllabus, as well as on a couple PowerPoint slides a while back. Look at page 1, these pages, and you'll see some other measurement resources that may be helpful in completing your paper successfully. We're not going to, the text takes 2 or 3 pages to talk about problem-oriented records. We're not going to cover this in class. The concept isn't over unique. It just talks about the same things that we're covering in a different way with a different vocabulary. So there's not much new here. We're not going to cover that. But just want to mention that computerized recording is used to store, retrieve, organize, and analyze data. And we're mainly going to be using Excel to do that. You're provided with a number of software packages in your book, CAS and Singwin, but we're not going to use those packages packages, I found that using Excel is a tool that you have available in your office, and most people have available at home, and they're familiar with it. Because some programs that are designed to track client progress, obviously, specialized software has some startup time required, and definitely a financial investment that you would want your agency to make, and typically agencies don't want to do that. And they can be difficult for clients if you're asking a client not familiar with computers to enter data into a computer. I know that my mother died a couple years ago, but if you had put her at age 80 in front of a computer to enter data, she would just be, that would just be too much. But I guess as generations pass, this won't be such a problem. The problem we have now, the digital divide, is, our children know more about computers than we do. So that's, that disadvantage will soon go away. Advantages: you can increase your efficiency, your accuracy, the speed at which you analyze your data. And interestingly enough, if clients are comfortable entering data into computers, what the research has shown is the client is more willing to reveal sensitive information if they're entering it into a computer. And I've always thought that was they don't explain why that's so in the book. They don't offer any theories. I think it provides a false sense of anonymity. You're sort of providing information, and it goes out into cyberspace. So maybe that's why. That's just conjecture on my part, though. Again, computer programs used with single system designs. There are 2 provided with the book that can be downloaded and are from the CD in the back of your book, or I guess it's a CD, DVD. Singwin and CAS. You can certainly look at those. We're not going to. Singwin looks at how you do inferential statistics. We're not going to use inferential statistics with single system design data. I'll explain why when the time comes. And then using CAS, I've just had a problem in using it. The last time I tried to use it a couple years ago, it looked like a DOS-based program. It just looked old, and I think I can offer some better alternatives using Microsoft Excel. So that's the way we're going to do. It's great for collecting and graphing single system design data. So that's what we're going to stick with. So that's the end of the lecture for Chapter 4. And I'll talk to you soon.